Welcome to Real People, No Mask Required. You'll learn about real people facing real life experiences with your host, Liz Younger, licensed clinical social worker.
Hello, my name is Liz Younger, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I have been in the field since 1988. And welcome to Real People, No Masks Required. This is a video series allowing people to tell and talk about their real, authentic experiences with regards to the pandemic. Today, I am delighted to introduce a local celebrity, and that would be James Supra. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm very thrilled as well. I'm a little tongue-tied, celebrities and all that.
Yeah.
With regards to starting off, trying to set the stage, shall we say. You are a working musician in the Lehigh Valley. And at the beginning of this pandemic, there was quite a lot going on for you that kind of set a tone. And then, of course, the quarantine hit. So I'm just going to ask if you could share with us or reflect a little bit about that experience entering into the current pandemic quarantine.
Well, it certainly has been very challenging, for everybody, I'm sure, but I'm not alone in that regard. Aside from COVID-19, I had a lot of challenging issues that were presenting itself throughout the latter part of 2019, even, we are the band that I am in, suffered a death. And, it was pretty challenging all the way around. And, I too personally have been, kind of going through some health issues the last 3 years. I was just most recently, I had a knee surgery replacement in January of early this year, 2020. But, leading up to the whole pandemic, I was, in the throes of trying to keep my band together, employed. I mean, I think of it like being, I am in a business where I have 4 employees and we're all full-time working musicians. So it is important for me as a business owner and as a musician, a live working musician, to keep employed. All 5 of us are full-time employees. Now, we do work, other side jobs and things like that, but our main gig is music. So having, the health issues that were, bestowed upon me in the last few years, I had brain surgery in 2019 and kidney cancer surgery later that year. And then leading up to this knee replacement surgery in January of 2020, obviously was really, it was playing on my mind as to how am I going to keep my business together. So I did make all the effort in the world to try to keep my band focused into early 2020. And we did that. I had several, gigs lined up so that Sarah Ayers, the female in my band, could front the band. And that was, beautiful. I had it all worked out for about 3 months. And then, of course, we suffered a loss in the band from our guitar player, Dave Smith, who, I'm going to put this right out there. This is something I don't generally talk about, but he committed suicide. And it was a very awful thing for anyone to deal with. The band was devastated. I'm still devastated by it. So, that's all prior to COVID-19 even really being talked about, So I had to really jump through a lot of hoops to try to keep this mental strength up. I mean, really, that's what I call it. I call it being mentally strong. It's not easy. Liz, I have a history. I was, in I think 2004, finally, I was diagnosed with clinical reoccurring severe depression. And I took steps to make that better because, I'm going to step off side for just a second here and say that, some of the most impressive musicians to me were always the ones, they always seem to have that edge that always made them so much better than everybody else. And you know what I found out that edge was? It was they hit rock bottom. And there's a serious artist or a serious musician can see that edge. that person has. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's alcoholism or depression or drug abuse or some sort of thing that really makes them smack down rock bottom.
Mhm.
But in 2004 or around 2004 and 5, I really did hit rock bottom. Fortunately, I wasn't, I'm so blessed, Liz. I like to say this to everybody who ever listens to my story is, you have to count your blessings, because I am very blessed. I could have been plagued with drug abuse, alcoholism, or a plethora of other things, but I was very lucky to just be, I was hit hard by severe reoccurring clinical depression. But when I did that, I took steps, and I have a strong support system, and I know what I need to do to stay on top of my depression. And I'm not always successful, but I still know what it takes and what is necessary of me to make sure that I do what I need to do to not let myself relapse. And we talked earlier in the week about some of the things that are important to me, and just like anything that's on a professional side, I need to know what my triggers are.
Mhm.
I need to know what my coping mechanisms are, and I just need to know those things. And after 10 years of this goes by, they start to become second nature. And just like anything else, when you're attempting to try something new, you have to like take baby steps, and it's a lot of hard work at the beginning, but it becomes more and more creatively easy or second nature like as you keep up the challenge, and and make your successes and your losses a reality, because they do become very much a reality. So having known all of those steps that I needed to take to keep myself mentally strong, I knew what I needed to do in January, or late December. I mean, this literally took place in about 4 or 5 days between the death of my guitar player and me going into surgery on January 6th of this year. And I did that. I made the steps. I got a new guitar player that could at least be in the rehearsal environment with my band, so that they could attempt to do some gigs for the next 3 months while I was out of commission. We did, I think the band did 4 gigs without me. And that led up to me coming back for technically 2 gigs. And March 14th was the last gig that this band of mine did professionally.
I know that, as you've already described, there was a lot going on that was already causing stress and strain for you. And obviously, the loss of your guitar player in such a tragic way was a burden, I'm guessing, that you.
It certainly was. It was devastating.
So when we look at June 14th, or March 14th, pardon me, you decided to play a gig. And in some ways, you were affected by people's reactions as we were going, because that was just a few days right before the quarantine.
Keep in mind, Liz, that's actually before. I mean, it's very, very close to the threshold of shutdown, no shutdown.
Sure.
And so, obviously for that week or so, maybe 10 days leading up to that, there was some conversation, in social media and on the news and things like that. And, I'm not one to be I'm a very private person, even on Facebook. I think of Facebook like a bar room. You don't talk politics or religion on Facebook in an argumentative setting. That's just me. Now, granted, a lot of my friends don't feel that same way, but that's just my prerogative, and that's the way I choose to conduct my Facebook page. It's business only. I have a personal page. Even on my personal page, I don't discuss that kind of thing. But long story short is, yes, I'm not going to mention any names, but there's 2 takeaways I want to share that's leading up to the whole beginning of the pandemic thing. And one of them is, the thing that really upset me the most was the social shaming of, and I'm talking about particularly musicians.
Right.
And that really, really affected me, because first of all, I have a very good friend of mine who's also super, super involved in what you're discussing. His name's Jason Ricci. I would love for you to reach out to him. He's just an amazing harmonica player from another planet, but he also suffers from his own mental health issues. But he told us right in the beginning, there's going to be this shaming going on, watch out. And lo and behold, just a day or so after we did that gig on March 14th, I saw people that I considered my friends. Now I have a million acquaintances, but truthfully, I don't have but a handful of friends. But still, I saw some people in the business that I considered my close acquaintances shame me personally. Now it wasn't vulgar or really like out there like really aggressive, but they made their point across that they thought that I did something wrong. Now again, Liz, please understand, I made no attempt to even acknowledge that statement. I just ignored it and I've deleted it from my page. Everyone has the right to post whatever they want on their own page. Don't come on somebody else's page and post what your opinions are. That's just unetiquette, I think, in my opinion. But long story short, the takeaway is this whole pandemic really it's changed. I'm going to quote you a very good friend of mine. He said, when the mask came on, the disguises all went away. You know, people started to be their true selves when they put those masks on. And I saw some big changes in people that I didn't ever think they were like that. So again, it's all part of life. You have to really take into consideration, people show their true colors when the rubber hits the road, you know, and things start changing. Because let's face it, things have changed a truckload since this whole thing started.
The 14th happened, you took this, you know, shaming, if you will, and then the quarantine hit the following week.
Yes.
And so once that hit, what was your thought? I mean, you earn your living by playing music and everything shut down.
Well, just as anybody else would have thought, I think it was very early in the stages, and I was wondering, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Because I had, I think about 221 shows booked between January 1st and December 31st of 2020. Well, that sure changed. You know, even it took about 3 weeks. It took about until the beginning of April that I was able to look at my calendar and just see months at a shot just disappear. That was, you know, approximately, you know, $15,000 to $20,000 a month.
I guess part of what I wonder is, like, internally, what was going on when you started to have that realization?
It's hard to answer that question internally. I'm going to tell you this. I didn't suffer too much trauma, and I'm being joking when I say that.
Sure.
You know, the quarantine thing wasn't real bad for us. Long story short is I suffered the most. I had the most difficult time, like towards the end of it. Like, you know, literally like the past 4 or 5 weeks were the hardest for me. The beginning, mentally, it wasn't that hard for me because, you know what it was? It was like a vacation in a way. There was a lot of, now granted, my wife, we have a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old here, and we have my 74-year-old Uncle Bob living here too, who we are his caretaker. So, and we don't have a big palatial mansion either. We live in a modest Cape Cod in you know, a nice you know, a nice neighborhood in Macungie, Pennsylvania. So, you know, our environment was cool. We hadn't really started to stress over money yet. We had a freezer full of food, and, you know, we had our little environment here where Mama was home all the time. You know, James was home all the time, and we were clicking as a family. And that was really the solidarity that really transformed us throughout the whole the next couple of months. Like I said, we did start to struggle. Now, keep in mind too, it wasn't but a few weeks after it started that the kids' school, you know, shut down, and then we had to start taking on the responsibility. And I say we like I have a mouse in my pocket. My wife took the responsibility of being a teacher.
Wow.
And you know, our 10-year-old, he's a tough kid, man. He's not easy to educate. I had a lot of respect for his teacher while there was no homeschooling, but to sit down at the table with him every single day, it was a challenge. So obviously this starts to compound and starts to eat away at the at the solidification of our little home group, you know. But
Right.
long story short, we did okay for the first month or so, and 2 months even.
So, right. And I do recall you mentioned earlier in this statement that the last couple weeks had the biggest impact. So what did you start to feel in these last several weeks with regards to the impact of this quarantine and pandemic?
Well, it's a little difficult for me to talk about, but I will, for the sake of the knowledge out there, and this is what I want to give to people that are listening to this podcast, you know. Take it from me, someone who really is a true fighter for you know, not being depressed, being able to pick yourself up by your bootstraps. It's not easy.
Right.
I suffered a sort of a setback, like a relapse. You know, there were things going on, you know, all the way around, you know, and I went to bed one night not feeling so well. Like I describe it as like a literal weight on my chest or on my shoulders that literally just pushes me down and makes it hard for me to get up.
Wow.
And I went to bed then. I wasn't feeling well at all. I didn't have a very good day that day, and it wasn't anybody's fault. It isn't really something that one thing triggered it.
Sure.
It was just like this demon of depression just creeps up, man, behind you, and it's the most evil thing I know. I'm not a firm believer in the devil. I mean, because I believe that, you know, there's definitely, I have my own God. I have a God out there, but I don't believe in the alternative side of it, except for depression. Depression is one that is very evil. So long story short, Liz, is I didn't get out of bed for, I'm really embarrassed to say, but it was about 48 hours.
Wow. So
And
I guess, go ahead.
I got up
I
to urinate and to, you know, use the bathroom. And I went downstairs and ate when I wanted to, but not very much, very little.
Mhm.
And I went back upstairs and got in bed again. And finally, my wife comes up and says, look, the kids, they think there's something wrong. They want to know. And, you know, I never really thought I was a responsible adult, you know. I don't really, but, you know, when I heard that, I had to just pull myself up. And I went downstairs and gave my kids a hug and said, I'm sorry. I haven't been feeling well, and I'm going to try to snap out of it. So that was that. And, you know, that episode really, because I don't like to slide backwards. Sliding backwards is very difficult for me because I could very easily, Liz, slip and slip off the whole edge of the earth. And I know how much of a fine line that is.
Yes.
That's why it's so important for me not to backslide in my depression.
Let's talk about some of the strategies. And I thought what I heard from you, which was really impressive, is that when your wife came up to talk about your children's experience, that gave you that wake up, so to speak, and the strength to recognize you needed to not just be passive right now. You needed to take some real action. So you went downstairs, but what were some of the other things that you used to address the depression issue, to write some of the coping skills that you talked about in the beginning of our conversation?
In that 48-hour period where I was really backsliding, you know, I wasn't using my coping mechanisms. I wasn't using and relying on the strength, my inner strength that I know that I possess. I think that's the real takeaway, is that at that point in time, I wasn't using the mechanisms that I know of. And those mechanisms that I do rely on are, you know, in my realistic, in my adult life, faith has been a huge one for me.
Okay.
Now that's, like I said, that's only like in the 3 years passing, 3 or 4 years that have just, you know, passed in my life. And that really means something to me too, because people who generally don't have faith in their life, and when I say faith, it could be a multitude of things, but, you know, in my situation, to really have a connection with God again was really important to me. And the takeaway from that is even if you are the kind of person that has never had or hasn't had for many, many decades a relationship with God, it's never really too late. You have to find the right person to kind of nudge you forward. In my case, I joined the church, the Macungie Church, Nazarene Church in Macungie. It used to be called that. Now it's called Brookside Community Church. But there was a pastor there that I just really related to. She was from Romania, and she was one of my wife's best friends. And she literally, when I had my brain surgery, she had my hand in her hand. She was in she had my hand in her hand when I went under, and she was holding it when I woke up.
Wow.
So that kind of faith, it's never too late. If you find the right person that you really can lead you down that path, it's very inspirational, and it's never too late. Another mechanism that was really, really helpful to me, and again, I'm disclosing this in the nature of, I hope that it helps somebody, even if it's just one other person. But I am a poster boy for a procedure that's called ECT, which is called electroconvulsive therapy. It's the old school, shock treatment,
Yes.
but it's so much more advanced now. And I had that in 2005. And just a little bit of a history, for the years leading up to 2005, when I really did hit rock bottom with my depression, I tried a lot of things. I did try therapy. I tried, deep psychoanalytic therapy, all of it, and medication. I can't tell you, I must have been on a half a dozen different medications, which all of them sucked, in my opinion. I'm not putting down medication. If somebody's on medication and it's working for them, good. It just never worked for me. And the doctor, or actually it was a counselor, a social worker counselor friend of mine, recommended this procedure. And, just like anybody else, at first I thought, wow, that's just a little bit too much for me. But, when you hit rock bottom and you've tried everything else, why not? What do I have to lose is what my thought was. Now, real quickly, I'll tell you that there's two ways to go about electroconvulsive therapy, bilaterally or unilaterally, which like the bilateral is getting shocked on both sides of your head at the same time. That's sort of called the full Monty. And I didn't want to do that. I went unilateral, just one side. Okay. Long story short, and I'm not going to try to educate anybody in this seminar, but they found out that people who have seizures, particularly epileptic people, very rarely suffer from depression. Okay. And it's because when they have a seizure, especially like a grand mal seizure, it realigns all the chemicals in your brain. So this was how they sold it to me. And I said, hey, man, I got to try it. And I kid you not, Liz, one session, I woke up from that session. Remember that weight I was telling you about?
Sure.
It was gone. I woke up and I could have like jumped up out of the bed. The weight was gone. So I had a series of 5 more of those electroconvulsive therapy sessions over the next 6 months. And I didn't suffer. One of the biggest side effects, I think, was long-term memory loss. And I didn't suffer much of that, maybe a little bit, but not much. And I went back out into the world and started my life all over again with a serious new bill on life and a new health, a clean slate. And I was able to reinvent my whole life. I started my own band. I was able to get back out on my own, living alone. It took a year or 2 or 3, but I was able to progress into the James Supra that the Lehigh Valley knows today. And that's more than 10 years.
One of the things I guess I think about, and this was probably 4 or 5 years ago, they actually had a James Supra Day. That was right before Music Fest, right? Or was?
Oh, that was when I won the World of Harmonica award. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was a great day.
And I think you're sharing that, your life got better. You actually started to excel once you addressed the things that you knew were getting in your way. And sometimes people don't see mental health that way. It sounds to me, and you get to correct me, that when you need that support, you can go to the pastor that you have connected with. You can use your family for support.
Huge family support, yes. That's another one of my tools, is the family support system.
And again, going into this pandemic, starting to recognize at the end of it that things were starting to maybe bring you back down, and reaching into that toolbox that you have to make sure that you don't find yourself back in 2004, right?
Yeah,
And that you now
absolutely.
have this new skill set that you were given since 2004, and it seems to have been and continues to be effective for you.
It really is effective for me. I have learned how to utilize those coping mechanisms. Now, I want to also reiterate too that I think it's important for people out there to know that, going back to 2004 and 5 and 6, when I was first learning of these mechanisms and these tools that are in my toolbox, you really have to recognize the fact that it was not easy.
Of course.
Just like anything else. I mean, you use these things and it doesn't seem natural. It doesn't seem very effective, but you really have to stick with it. I'll put an analogy to harmonica. The harmonica is an easy instrument to play. Anybody can do it, even kids. Kids do it a lot, but it's a very difficult instrument to master. You have to play it and play it and play it for years and years and years. Depression, coping mechanisms are very much the same thing. You have to utilize them. You have to start out like a novice and just keep at it, because once you start getting results, then it starts to get a little easier and it becomes more and more effective. And then it becomes almost like second nature, or very creatively much easier to use them creatively. So that's the takeaway that I want people to think about when they're trying out these, when they're trying to get their first 30-day chip from AA or something. You get it, but it doesn't really mean anything to you yet. You have it in your hand and you can look at it, and it's a benchmark of success. But when you are able to have a serious win from using your depression mechanism coping skills, it builds you up inside and you feel very accomplished. So take that away, because when you're struggling at the beginning, know that it's going to get better. Life's a spiral. I used to think life was like a roller coaster, ups and downs, ups and downs. I used to always look forward to being down on my roller coaster part of life, because I knew I was coming back up. And that was my methodology for many, many years, until I realized that life's not a roller coaster. Life is a spiral, and you're never down. You're just coming around.
Okay.
And you're always moving up.
So I am, I guess, just blown away at your level of sharing. And I also want to applaud you that you didn't give up. Lots of things have happened. You reached out to the things that worked for you. You've talked multiple times about feeling very blessed. And I'm guessing a part of that is because you have these people in place where the chemistry is good, the support is good, and they've helped you to redefine who you are. And that is shown in your rise in popularity in the Lehigh Valley. James, I can't thank you enough today. I really look forward to seeing you out in the community, and I really want to applaud you. And if I could give you a certificate for bravery, I would absolutely do it right now.
Thank you, Liz. That means the world to me.
And yeah, thank you for being a guest on Real People, No Mask Required. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Real People, No Mask Required. Real stories, real life events, real people. For more information, visit lizyounger.com. That's lizyounger.com.